Colleagues, may I ask you to take your seats, please? Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my pleasure to call to order and welcome you to the second regular session of the UNICEF Executive Board for 2025. We will begin this morning with agenda item 1, which is adoption of the agenda. The provisional annotated agenda, timetable, and organization of work can be found in document E/ICEF/2025/27, which is available on the document page of the Executive Board website. I invite the Secretary of the Executive Board, Mr. Andres Franco, to introduce the agenda and the conduct of business for the session. You have the floor, Andres.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The details of today's program have been published on the website of the Executive Board, and they were introduced on the 19th of August 2025 at the previous session to the current one, and they were published on the UN Journal as well. I'm pleased to inform you that today, Tuesday, the 2nd of September, and tomorrow, the 3rd of September, and on Friday, the 5th of September, meetings will be held in the morning from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. and in the afternoon from 3 p.m. until 5 p.m. On Thursday, the 4th of September, we expect meetings to be held only in the morning from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. In the event of changes to the calendar, these shall be announced during the session. The updated program for each day's meetings will be available in the Journal of the United Nations. Distinguished delegates, in accordance with Decision 2014/1 of the Executive Board, the documents for the country programs that will be reviewed and approved in a single session in accordance with the non-objection procedure. Please also note that at the President's request on behalf of the Bureau, there has been a change to the approval process for the program documents for the countries and for program extensions for countries under review, and this will be applied starting this session, the second regular session of 2025. At the end of the discussion on the program documents for the countries and following interventions from member states, the President will request the agreement of the Executive Board for the approval of the country program documents region by region. If there are no objections, the President will then approve. Following introduction of the extensions for country programs underway, the President will request the agreement of the Board to take note of the extensions approved by the Executive Director. The President will now request the agreement of the Board to approve program extensions for country programs underway for whom approval has been requested. If there are no objections, the President will give his green light. In accordance with the modified procedure, draft decisions on program documents for countries and for program extensions for country programs that are underway under items 6A and 6B of the program were not included in the initial compilation of draft decisions that was distributed by the Executive Board from the 5th of August 2025. Distinguished delegates, please also note carefully that following the discussion panel on the country documents, the floor will be opened for interventions from regions so that member states can present new country program documents and make statements. Then the regional directors of UNICEF will be given the floor to respond and to share any messages from the ground. After that, there will be a further round for other member states. If there are no objections, the program documents for the countries in each region will be approved before moving to the next segment. Please recall that the chair will be giving the floor in accordance with the following priorities. Firstly, members of the Bureau of the Executive Board of UNICEF wishing to take the floor, and they will be given the floor according to their rank. Secondly, the representatives of regional groups of the United Nations who are speaking on behalf of a group or giving joint statements, and once again, according to their rank. Thirdly, permanent missions to the United Nations who have previously, ahead of time, sent a written request to the office to request the floor. They will be given the floor next, and they're according to the priorities of, the members of the executive board followed by observers will be given priority. And then fourthly, requests in writing sent ahead of time and received after the deadline, followed by requests from those who are attending electronically, and they will be given the floor according to the order in which the requests are received. The microphones will start flashing to let the speakers know 1 minute before their time has elapsed, and the microphone will go off automatically after this time frame. The time limit to be applied for the session will be applied here. Microphones will go off automatically. We also request that you send requests to speak to the office. Requests were required by midnight on Thursday, the 28th of August. All requests for the floor within this time limit were included in the speakers list that was published on the website of the Executive Board on Friday, the 29th of August, 2025. Now, the updated list can be viewed on the wall of this conference room prior to the beginning of the meetings of that day. In order for these provisions to be effective and efficient, we require your assistance. And so we would ask delegations who have not yet sent in their requests to speak to do so as soon as possible. And we would ask those delegations who are going to make statements at this session to send electronic versions of their statements to my colleague Nogel Sagat via at least 2 hours before they make their interventions. Please also include the item of the statement in the subject line of the email and also in the header of the statement. Once these statements have been sent to the Secretariat, these statements will remain confidential until the delegations make the statement, following which they will be published on the website of the Executive Board and in the journal. We would ask delegations also to abide by the time limits when they make their oral statements. Extended versions of their statements, as they have been sent to the Secretariat, will be published on the website. For those delegates who only want to observe the session rather than actually participate, so they can follow activities on the website. So we look forward to a very productive session with you this 2025. Thank you.
Thanks to the Secretary for his remarks. Would any delegation like to comment on the provisional agenda? If no one wishes to take the floor at this time, I take it that the Executive Board wishes to adopt the annotated agenda, timetable, and organization of work document E/ICEF/2025/27. If there is no objection, it is so decided. Distinguished delegates, in accordance with the Rule 50 and the annex to the Rules of Procedure, I now ask the Secretary of the Board to inform us of the observer delegations that have communicated to the Secretariat they wish to participate in the session. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the Secretariat has so far received credentials from 33 observer delegations, 2 intergovernmental organizations, 1 international organization, 3 non-governmental organizations, and 2 national committees for UNICEF. The delegations that have not yet submitted their credentials are requested to share them with us as soon as possible by completing the online credentials accreditation form, as well as informing Ms. Tian Ruby Lu by email when this has been done so that we can take timely action. The accreditation form is linked in the information note, which has been published on the documents page for the second regular session on the UNICEF Executive Board website. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Secretary for his remarks. We have now concluded our discussions under this agenda item. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Executive Director Russell, ladies and gentlemen, I extend a warm welcome to you all to the second regular session of 2025, our last formal session of this year. We are meeting at a time of continued challenges around the world, challenges that are affecting children in an unprecedented manner. We also face adjustments within the UNICEF as organization adapts to the global funding crisis and implements changes to its operations and programs. What remains the same, however, is unwavering commitment of UNICEF to upholding children's rights and helping every child reach their full potential. I saw this commitment firsthand during my visits to Madagascar and Tunisia, where I met children whose lives had been transformed by UNICEF support. Their resilience reminded me that our discussions here are not abstract. They are about giving real children hope and opportunity. As board members, we carry a shared responsibility. Together, we are guardians of children's future. Our role in supporting the organization's mandate to help children around the world, and the most vulnerable children in particular, remains as important as ever. I look forward to our exchanges this week as we consider the 16 items on the agenda, which include 5 draft decisions. Today, following opening and general statements, we will consider the UNICEF strategic plan and integrated budget for the period from 2026 to 2029. 2 important documents that will help us guide the organizations over the next 4 years. Tomorrow morning, we will focus on more than 1,000 new country program documents, and we will hear from UNICEF experts and from a panel on the theme of protecting children from violence. We will also review extensions of several ongoing country programs, which provide continuity of UNICEF operations while ensuring alignment with national priorities and the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks. In the afternoon tomorrow, we will consider the structured dialogue on financing the results of the Strategic Plan 2022-2025 and the annual joint report on the implementation of the Joint Cost Recovery Policy. We will also hear an update on UNICEF efforts to address racism and racial discrimination. On Thursday morning, we will focus on 3 items: progress on the review of governance and oversight of the executive boards of UNDP, UNFPA, UNOPS, UNICEF, and UN Women by the Joint Inspection Unit, the draft plan for global evaluations for 2026 to 2029, and an update on UNICEF humanitarian action with a focus on protection of children in crisis. On Friday, the last day of the session, we will begin with a special focus session titled Thirsting for a Future, Securing Safe and Resilient Water and Sanitation for Every Child, during which we will discuss the critical role that water, sanitation, and hygiene play in the development of children. On that day, we will also consider the UNICEF Gender Equality Action Plan for 2026 to 2029, as well as other matters before we conclude the session. While this session marks our last formal meeting of 2025, our work within the Executive Board will continue throughout the rest of the year. There will be a joint field visit by the Executive Boards of UNICEF, UNDP, UNFPA, UNOPS, UN Women, and WFP, which will provide delegations with opportunities to see and learn about the critical work that UNICEF and other UN agencies, together with partners, are doing on the ground. We will also continue to plan for board sessions in 2026 and beyond. Please join me as we turn to the agenda for the session. I look forward to our discussions on all matters before us, and I am confident that we will continue to put children at the center of our focus with a spirit of mutual understanding and active participation. I now invite Ms. Catherine Russell, UNICEF Executive Director, to make some opening remarks. Madam Executive Director, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you so much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, friends. It's really so nice to see you all here for this second regular session of the UNICEF Executive Board for 2025. I begin by extending my sincere gratitude to Ambassador Hikmat and to the entire Bureau for your steady leadership and support through these challenging times. So we meet at a time of profound challenge for the world's children. Cuts to global assistance are putting young lives and futures at risk just when they need us the most. Many governments have already reduced their development and humanitarian budgets, and UNICEF expects at least a 20% drop in income over the next 4 years. Children are growing up amidst multiple overlapping threats: conflict, displacement, climate shocks, poverty, and discrimination, with too few safety nets to protect them. Essential services that keep them alive, healthy, and safe are being cut back or shut down. According to a recent study in The Lancet, cuts in development and humanitarian aid announced in 2025 could result in an additional 14 million deaths globally by 2030, including 4.5 million children under the age of 5. These are not distant risks. They are immediate, devastating consequences when health systems, nutrition programs, education services, and clean water are taken away from the youngest members of society. And while this is foremost a crisis for children, it is a crisis for all of us. When children lose access to vaccines, diseases spread across borders. When they go without nutrition, education, or protection, the desperation that follows fuels instability and displacement that ripple outward. The more fragile children's lives become, the more fragile the world becomes. Yet we know something else. When we invest in children, the returns are extraordinary. Decades of evidence prove that smart investments in child health, education, protection, and resilience do not just save lives. They build stronger, safer, and more prosperous societies. That is why the discussions we will have this week on our new strategic plan and the integrated budget could not be more important. These are the tools that will shape how UNICEF continues to deliver for children in this most difficult environment. Excellencies, UNICEF is already one of the most cost-effective organizations in the global development and humanitarian system. But in the face of the deepest drop in projected external funding in memory, we are not standing still. Through our Future Focus initiative, we are strategically repositioning UNICEF to continue to deliver for every child, especially the most vulnerable, and to implement the ambitious targets set out in our new strategic plan in an increasingly constrained resource environment. We are taking bold and necessary steps to become leaner, more agile, and closer to the children we serve. We are cutting core budgets at headquarters and regional offices by 25%. We are relocating about 70% of headquarters staff to lower cost duty stations. We are reducing posts across the organization by approximately 14%. and we are consolidating regional offices in South Asia and East Asia, as well as Europe and Central Asia, and the Middle East and North Africa. We are also transforming our approach to delivering technical assistance for our programs to be even faster, more context-specific, and closer to children. This includes establishing 4 centers of excellence to provide high-quality, tailored technical assistance, driving more substantial and sustainable impacts at scale. These measures require very tough decisions. They involve hardship for talented colleagues who have dedicated years of service to UNICEF, but they are necessary if we are to protect our delivery capacity in country offices closest to the children who depend on us. It is also important to stress that this reset is not only about coping with funding cuts, it's about adapting UNICEF to a changing world. It is about UNICEF being the best we can be. The Future Focus Initiative is making UNICEF fit for purpose in the 21st century, and it is precisely this renewed efficiency and agility that will allow us to deliver on the ambitious goals of the Strategic Plan 2026 to 2029. The new strategic plan is our roadmap for the final push to achieve the child-related sustainable development goals by 2030. It is firmly anchored in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and it commits UNICEF to sharpen our focus, strengthen national systems, and expand impact at scale, leaving no child behind. The plan is built around 5 impact results to be achieved by 2029. First, save 10 million children's lives and ensure at least 500 million children are healthy, well-nourished, and developmentally on track. Second, enable 350 million children and young people to learn and gain skills for life and work. Third, lift 100 million children out of multidimensional poverty, ensuring greater access to social protection and livelihoods. Fourth, protect 350 million children from violence, including child marriage, female genital mutilation, online exploitation, and violent punishment. And fifth, shield 500 million children from disasters and environmental risks by strengthening community resilience and climate-smart systems. To achieve these results, the plan introduces 3 key shifts. First, a sharper focus, moving from a broad set of outputs to a unified whole-of-organization commitment to these 5 impact results. Second, a shift to scale, continuing to move from program outputs to population-level outcomes with evidence-based interventions delivered across entire systems. And third, a differentiated approach, tailoring strategies to country contexts, from low-income fragile settings to upper-middle-income countries with very different challenges. The plan will be accelerated by investing in adolescent girls, strengthening frontline community systems, and harnessing innovation and digital transformation. It will be underpinned by critical efforts to drive efficiencies and exercise strong governance and oversight. UNICEF's work in humanitarian action will be critical in achieving the plan's impact results. This is particularly important given the historically high numbers of children in need and facing grave rights violations. Despite extremely challenging conditions, our teams will continue their life-saving work for children in places like the DRC, Haiti, and Ukraine, as well as in Gaza and Sudan, where children are now at extreme risk from conflict and famine. I would note that this is the first time we have seen 2 simultaneous famines. In other words, these are truly unprecedented times. This also includes attacks on humanitarian workers, including UNICEF and WFP staff who were detained in Yemen over the weekend. UNICEF remains committed to playing our critical role in responding to these humanitarian emergencies, despite the challenges. Excellencies, in short, the strategic plan sets ambitious goals, but they are goals we can achieve with support from our executive board, our donors, and our partners. The integrated budget aligns with this strategic plan. It reflects the hard choices we have made to ensure that resources are directed where they are needed most. UNICEF projects a total income of $26 billion for the period 2026 to 2029, a 27% decline compared to the previous period. This is the most dramatic financial contraction UNICEF has faced in decades. Of the funds available for development and humanitarian activities, 93% will go directly to country programs. That represents a $6.6 billion reduction from the last cycle, but it underscores our commitment to protecting frontline delivery. The integrated budget is not only a financial framework, it is a statement of values. It prioritizes children above all, and it channels resources to where they will have the greatest impact. Excellencies, with respect to broader changes facing the UN system, UNICEF is deeply engaged in the UN-80 reform process and the wider UN development system reforms. As the United Nations prepares to mark its 80th anniversary, UNICEF shares the Secretary General's commitment to building a UN that is effective, results-driven, and fit for purpose in the 21st century. All UNICEF country programs are now 100% aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Frameworks. Nearly 90% of our country offices engage in joint programs. More than half of our offices are already in common UN premises with expanded back office arrangements. UNICEF co-leads both the humanitarian and development assistance clusters under the UN-80 task forces. We are driving efficiencies across the system, scaling up our Global Shared Services Center, working with WFP to optimize the UN supply chain, including the integrated humanitarian supply chain, and coordinating with OCHA, UNHCR, and IOM to pool humanitarian diplomacy capacities. But no matter how lean or efficient UNICEF becomes, children will not get what they need without a fundamental shift in how the world finances their futures. Core resources are the backbone of multilateralism. Core resources directly fund country programs as well as critical oversight functions. They give UNICEF the flexibility to respond swiftly in emergencies, the independence to act based on children's needs rather than political agendas, and the ability to reach the hardest to reach children. And yet, public sector regular resources are projected to fall to just $250 million, the lowest in more than a decade, and barely 5% of UNICEF's overall income. For an organization with such a critical mandate operating in 190 countries, this is dangerously insufficient. UNICEF does have one of the most diversified fundraising bases in the UN system. Last year, our private sector partners and 10 million individual supporters contributed more than $1.8 billion, including nearly $1 billion in regular resources. We are incredibly fortunate and so grateful to our extraordinary national committees who mobilize our private sector resources. But these contributions cannot replace the responsibilities of governments to uphold the funding compact and ensure that children's rights are financed in practice, not just in principle. Excellencies, let me return to the point I made at the start. Investing in children is one of the wisest, highest return decisions any government can make. Immunization saves 4.4 million lives every year and has prevented 154 million deaths over the last half century, delivering $1.5 trillion in global health and economic benefits. Clean water and sanitation yield a $5.50 return for every single dollar spent, while preventing up to 1.4 million deaths a year. Treating severe malnutrition can save a child's life for just $150. Preventing malnutrition together delivers a $16 return for every $1 invested. Since we last met in June, I visited Burkina Faso, where I saw the transformative power of investing in children, even in a region like the Sahel, which is deeply affected by conflict and the climate crisis. Despite these challenges, most children in Burkina Faso are vaccinated, and community health workers are reaching children in the most remote areas. UNICEF and partners are working with communities and supporting governments across the Central Sahel in opening schools and providing essential services for millions of children. These are not only life-saving interventions, they are protective measures that make societies stronger, more stable, and more secure. When children are healthy, safe, and learning, economies prosper, and peace is more likely to endure. That is why UNICEF is calling for a renewed global commitment to financing for children, a bold, coordinated effort to ensure that children's rights are funded not only in principle, but in practice. We all have roles to play. We urge governments to protect domestic social spending and ring-fence essential services for children, especially in fragile contexts. We urge donors and investors to prioritize children in decisions on overseas assistance, debt relief, climate finance, and humanitarian contributions with flexibility and principle. And we urge the global community to combine ODA with innovative finance, public-private partnerships, and smarter delivery models that put children first. Excellencies, at this moment of crisis and change, UNICEF's mandate is more relevant than ever. But relevance is not enough. We must be effective, efficient, principled, and trusted. That's what the strategic plan and integrated budget before you represent, a leaner, more agile, more accountable UNICEF, but one that is still ambitious for children. Despite the enormous challenges, I do remain hopeful. Hopeful because I see the extraordinary dedication of our staff working on the front lines. Hopeful because of the trust millions of supporters place in us around the world. Hopeful because of the strength and commitment of this executive board. And most of all, hopeful because children are hopeful themselves and inspire all of us to believe in a better future. Together we can be a force for good, and we can make the world a better place for all children. Thank you all very much.
I thank Executive Director Russell for her remarks. Distinguished delegates, I now open the floor for the general and national statements. Delegations are kindly reminded that their statements should remain within the agreed time limits, 3 minutes for individual delegations speaking in their national capacity, and 5 minutes for delegations speaking on behalf of the United Nations regional groups or for joint statements of 2 or more member states. Microphones will start blinking to alert speakers 1 minute before the end of their allotted time, and speakers will be muted within 1 minute after their time has ended. I give the floor to distinguished Chargé d'Affaires of the plurinational state of Bolivia, Vice President of the Executive Board. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, Executive Director Catherine Russell, distinguished members of the Executive Board, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to deliver these remarks on behalf of the Executive Board Bureau members, Eritrea, Estonia, Germany, Tajikistan, and my own country, Bolivia. We express our gratitude to the President of the Executive Board and to Executive Director Catherine Russell for their opening statements. We also extend our sincere appreciation to all UNICEF personnel, both at headquarters and in the field, for their unwavering dedication to advancing the organization's mandate, often under challenging conditions. This session marks a pivotal moment as we prepare to endorse the UNICEF Strategic Plan 2026-2029, an ambitious yet practical framework to advance children's rights. Building on lessons from 2022-2025, the plan prioritizes high-impact results that address structural barriers and focus on marginalized communities. Anchored in UNICEF missions and the Convention on the Rights of the Child, it sets out 5 impact results: survival and development, learning and skills, freedom from poverty, protection from violence, and resilience to climate and environmental risks. Through target focus, scale, and differentiated strategies, UNICEF aims to respond effectively to diverse country contexts, leverage partnerships, and achieve meaningful change at scale, leaving no child behind. The Bureau strongly supports this strategic plan and looks forward to its endorsement and full implementation. For this second regular session, we welcome the special focus session on water and sanitation, which underscores the essential role of WASH in promoting health, dignity, and resilience. UNICEF's leadership in strengthening WASH systems, particularly in fragile and humanitarian contexts, is critical to achieving universal access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene for every child. We also acknowledge the continued work to enhance governance, including the follow-up to the Joint Inspection Unit recommendations and the roadmap adopted at the annual session 2024. The Bureau remains committed to advancing this process in a consultative and inclusive manner, ensuring that the Executive Board strengthens its oversight and governance role in line with best practices. Regarding the UN-80 initiative, we recognize it as a unique opportunity to reaffirm multilateral cooperation and the centrality of children in global priorities. Given UNICEF's active participation in both the humanitarian and development working groups, the Bureau looks forward to receiving an update on the progress of this discussion and exploring how the board can continue to engage effectively in shaping outcomes that support children worldwide. In conclusion, as Bureau members of the UNICEF's Executive Board, we reaffirm our steadfast support for UNICEF's mandate and our determination to work together to ensure that every child, everywhere, has the opportunity to survive, thrive, and reach their full potential. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to distinguished representative of Eritrea, Vice President of the Executive Board. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your opening remarks and your leadership to advance the agenda of children everywhere. I wish also to extend our sincere appreciation to the Executive Director, Ms. Catherine Russell, for her comprehensive statement on the state of world children and UNICEF's vital response. Mr. President, it is my honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the African member states of the Executive Board of UNICEF, Equatorial Guinea, Eswatini, Mauritania, Mozambique, Nigeria, Senegal, United Republic of Tanzania, and my own country, Eritrea. We begin by thanking the UNICEF Secretariat and the Executive Board Secretary and his team for the hard work put in the preparation of the session documents for board's consideration and information. In the second regular session, we shall be addressing many important issues at a period that we are witnessing the implementation of the SDGs is either off track or regressing, which is a cause for concern. And in that regard, we would like to stress the following points. From the outset, we wish to express our strong support to the mandate and work of UNICEF to ensure that every child reaches its full potential, guided by the Convention on the Right of the Child and other relevant international and regional legal instruments. The strategic direction on the work of UNICEF 2026-2029 that we are expected to adopt during this session, an outcome of intensive consultation with the current financial realities in mind, will be an important tool in the implementation of SDGs pertaining to children. The strategic plan closely aligned with the timeline of the remaining years of Agenda 2030 would require our full support, solidarity, and commitment. Mr. President, UNICEF's strategy for Africa, adopted a year ago by the board, is also another important tool with sharp focus on children in Africa to address the unique challenges the continent faces and to reach the most vulnerable and hard-to-reach children to ensure that no child is left behind. The need for urgent and sustained investment in health, development, education, and overall well-being of African children will be crucial towards boosting for a prosperous, stable, and equitable future for every child in the region. Thus, the strategy, as important as it is, would like to stress that it is incorporated in all CPDs to realize its impact on the ground. The work we do in favor of children must also empower children themselves to have the agency and be part of driving actions at the country level. Mr. President, all these important strategies can be carried forward on the basis of funding commitments we have been making, including in the most recent conference in Seville, where we have successfully adopted Compromiso de Sevilla with a call for concrete, urgent action to mobilize innovative, adequate, affordable, predictable, and accessible financing for developing countries. In this regard, we encourage UNICEF the good work it does in its efforts to emphasize the importance of the core resources that gives it flexibility and agility, as well as its intensive network and outreach in strengthening partnership involving the public, private, and others. Mr. President, we share the profound concern expressed in regards to the humanitarian situation of children around the world, including the cutting by 20%. Amidst the broader frame characterized by persistent geopolitical tensions, escalating conflicts, political instabilities, and extreme climate conditions, we commend UNICEF's repositioning efforts to respond to this huge humanitarian crisis, including in the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza, Eastern Africa, the Sahel, and other regions. It is critical that all humanitarian actions, especially in under-reported crises, are guided by the key principles of international humanitarian law. We would also like to call for safety and security of humanitarian workers. Mr. President, in conclusion, as we shall be considering several country program documents from across several regions, we'd like to indicate our full support to their adoption on the non-objection basis and look forward to a productive and successful session. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank distinguished representative of Eritrea. Now I invite distinguished representative of Germany, Vice President of the Executive Board, to take the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, member of the Executive Board, esteemed UNICEF staff, Madam Executive Director, I thank Madam Executive Director, Ms. Catherine Russell, for her report. Allow me to respond with a few remarks in national capacity. Germany welcomes UNICEF's continued engagement in the UN80 initiative and in the broader UNDS reform process. UN80 does not start from scratch, but builds upon successful reforms of the UNDS system to which UNICEF has made significant contributions. We view all these reform efforts as crucial to ensuring that the UN remains fit for purpose and that UNICEF can continue to deliver meaningful impact for children worldwide. We commend UNICEF's demonstrated commitment to agility, efficiency, and delivery on the ground, even in the face of an increasingly constrained financial environment. Let me reaffirm, Germany remains fully committed to a rules-based multilateral system and the 2030 Agenda. We will continue to uphold the universality and indivisibility of human rights, including the rights of children, and to advocate for gender equality, bodily autonomy, and the sexual and reproductive rights of women and girls. Their full participation and inclusion in all spheres of society is not negotiable. Turning to UNICEF's reform agenda, Germany acknowledges the various cost efficiency measures already undertaken. At the same time, we call on UNICEF to further consolidate and accelerate its reforms, ensuring transparent communication with the Executive Board on progress, challenges, and the concrete results achieved. We strongly encourage UNICEF to strengthen coordination with other UN entities and reduce duplication, particularly by focusing on its comparative advantages and honoring processes and instruments introduced to enhance interagency collaboration. As member states prepare to consider proposals emerging from the UN80 work streams, we are keen to learn about how UNICEF positions itself within a reformed UN development system and humanitarian architecture. We expect UNICEF to contribute proactively and with a forward-looking vision that strengthens the system as a whole. Finally, let me reiterate Germany's commitment as a steadfast partner of UNICEF. We continue to provide both core contributions and program financing, fully aware that flexible core resources are indispensable for efficiency, resilience, and impact. We will remain engaged in supporting UNICEF in navigating this period of transition and in safeguarding its ability to deliver on behalf of children everywhere, and especially in fragile and conflict-affected contexts where the need is greatest. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Germany. I now invite distinguished representative of Belgium to take the floor.
Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, I deliver this statement on behalf of Australia, Canada, the European Union as a donor, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Iceland, Ireland, Japan, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Luxembourg, New Zealand, Norway, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and my own country, Belgium. We thank you for your opening statement and explicitly convey our unwavering support to all staff members for their commitment to deliver for every child. This year, UNICEF faced unprecedented challenges. While suffering from a steep decline in funding, the needs of children continued to escalate. We acknowledge all efforts to reposition the organization in these turbulent times through the Future Focus Initiative, the UN80 Initiative, and the Humanitarian Reset. We firmly ask that reforms are bold and ambitious, transparent and evidence-based, address the necessary business model and HR reforms, ensure system-wide coherence and reinforce operational effectiveness to pursue UN development system reform with renewed determination. In times of shrinking resources and growing needs, efficiency and accountability are not just managerial issues, they are political imperatives, essential to maintaining the trust of member states. UNICEF's reform must therefore go beyond cost-cutting to demonstrate the organization's contribution to the credibility and collective strength of the UN development system, maximizing the impact of every dollar spent. We welcome the detailed financial projections for the year ahead. However, we have yet to learn about an overall strategy that will guide UNICEF through these reforms. We therefore urge UNICEF to ensure close and timely information and consultation of the board and donors throughout the process. Allow us to highlight a few questions in this regard. 1. How will UNICEF ensure that its reformed efforts not only achieve financial sustainability, but also strengthen member states' trust and reinforce UNICEF's role within the wider UN development system? Secondly, what share of cost savings are projected to be achieved through staff cuts as compared to other categories of measures? Similarly, what departments of the organization face the harshest cuts, and what is the rationale behind this choice? Third, how are the planned personnel cost reductions distributed across staff categories? 4, what changes to travel policies are being implemented, including, but not limited to, reducing business class travel? 5, what specific measures will UNICEF take to ensure continuity of core operational functions, especially in high-risk or fragile contexts? How does UNICEF coordinate its internal reform efforts, including staff reductions, with other UN entities, including the resident coordinator system, particularly at country level, to help ensure the operational effectiveness and collective delivery of UN country teams? How does UNICEF plan to improve efficiency through consolidation of country and regional offices, as well as program portfolios? 6, how can UNICEF identify and strengthen its comparative advantages within the UN development system to reduce mandate duplication and fragmentation with other agencies? And finally, the 7th question, how do UNICEF's current restructuring and cost-saving efforts align with the principles and proposals emerging from the UN80 initiative and humanitarian reset reform process? We look forward to learn how UNICEF will approach these reforms and being regularly updated and consulted on the overall strategy to navigate through challenging times. I thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. I now invite distinguished permanent representative of El Salvador to take the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President, Madam Executive Director, and all UNICEF officials. El Salvador welcomes the strategic plan drawn up by UNICEF for the period 2026 through 2029, and thereby reiterates its commitment to continue working closely and actively for the well-being of children and adolescents in our country, but also all over the world. This strategic plan is of vital importance as it sets out the organization's global roadmap and addresses the main challenges affecting children, such as the impact of climate change, conflicts, and social inequalities. Its salience lies in the fact that it promotes the adapting of UNICEF's responses in a constantly changing world, ensuring that its actions are more effective, equitable, and sustainable. We echo UNICEF's commitment in this plan to strengthen its partnerships with governments in order to bring about meaningful change for children. However, to ensure that no child, girl or boy, is left behind, UNICEF must walk hand in hand with governments rather than on a parallel track to them, as true impact is only achieved when UNICEF accompanies national priorities rather than replacing or duplicating them. In this regard, we express our confidence that UNICEF and all of its field offices will work in coordination with states and their governments in implementation of the 2026-2029 strategic plan, as well as in execution of the respective country programs. President, El Salvador is looking to the 2022-2026 country program, developed on the basis of national priorities for children, to guide our work with UNICEF in key sectors such as health, violence prevention, child protection, and humanitarian response. My delegation calls for any intervention in the country to be strengthened and to complement the efforts of the Salvadoran government. This support becomes even more critical in a context in which El Salvador will be reviewing and assessing its current country program with UNICEF. The Salvadoran government will always stand ready and be at the disposal of UNICEF and the entire United Nations system in order to work in an open, respectful, and constructive manner. President, we also support strengthening partnerships with key actors, including the private sector, provided that these complement rather than replace the role of governments in setting priorities for children and do not detract from the centrality of member states in implementation of UNICEF's work. We reiterate the need for these elements to be at the core of ongoing reform efforts, especially under the framework of the UN 80 initiative, whose impact on the United Nations system continues to develop. And last but not least, we would be grateful for more clarity regarding the list of speakers in this session, especially for the coordination of smaller delegations such as mine. I thank you.
I thank distinguished permanent representative of El Salvador. I now invite distinguished permanent representative of Mozambique to take the floor.
Mr. President, I would like to start by thanking you and the Bureau for the exemplary leadership of this executive board. We also commend Executive Director Catherine Russell and her team for their unwavering dedication to safeguarding children's rights and well-being in an increasingly uncertain and complex environment. Mozambique aligns itself with the statement delivered by the permanent representative of Eritrea on behalf of the African members of this board and wishes to add the following remarks in its national capacity. Mr. President, the world confronts a sobering and stark reality that warrants our urgent attention and decisive action. Escalating violent conflicts, climate shocks, and poverty are exacerbating disparities in children's access to vital services, severely undermining progress on key child welfare indicators. Every child deserves the support, protection, and opportunities necessary not merely to survive, but to thrive and reach their full potential. On our part, we must reaffirm our collective commitment to prioritizing children's needs and well-being. Mr. President, the future of childhood is shaped by the decisions and the investment choices we make today. We therefore strongly encourage UNICEF to maintain its focus on creating enabling conditions to allow all children, regardless of their locations and circumstances, to grow safely, learn effectively, and reach their full potential and become the agents of change in their respective communities. This commitment is a moral imperative and of strategic importance if we are to achieve our shared 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. We welcome UNICEF's 2026-2029 strategic plan, which prioritizes integrated approaches to health systems, nutrition security, quality education, poverty reduction, and comprehensive child protection. We remain confident that these strategies can help UNICEF create a more equitable and sustainable future for children and families, even in the face of mounting adversity. Mr. President, Mozambique particularly appreciates UNICEF's commitment to localization and community-driven solutions, recognizing that sustainable change must be rooted in local context and capabilities. As a country that has benefited from UNICEF's partnership in areas ranging from maternal and child health to education and emergency response, we understand firsthand the transformative impact of well-designed, culturally appropriate interventions. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now invite distinguished permanent representative of Ecuador. You have the floor.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, President. I'm grateful to the excellent presentation from Executive Director Russell. Thank you for that. Ecuador is facing a serious situation of violence caused by transnational organized crime, with tens of thousands of armed people seeking to disrupt the peace. And children are one of the main victims of this, as is the case in circumstances such as these. And this requires a global responses and a global policy approach. Under these circumstances, UNICEF's support to national institutions has been essential in order to increase the coverage of education programs during emergencies, and strengthening systems for the prevention and protection against violence, and to increase response capacity in light of the challenge posed by the forced recruitment and use of children and adolescents in those areas most affected by armed conflict. As a result, we could hardly fail to express our deep gratitude to UNICEF for its commitment to supporting our national institutions and ensuring that children therefore have access to conditions of well-being, dignity and security which are necessary in order to fulfill their potential. Ecuador thanks Executive Director Russell for this support and also expresses our support for UNICEF's strategic plan and integrated budget for the period 2026 through 2029. The 5 priority impact results set out in the plan with a renewed context-oriented and nationally owned approach will contribute to accelerating the achievement of the SDGs without leaving children behind. Collective action must ensure sustainable financing in the implementation of the plan, as this will be critical to improving program implementation and UNICEF's efficient response to the needs in the most complex settings. President, colleagues, genuine concern for the situation of children around the world is the lodestar that should guide the work of the Executive Board at this session. We have a duty to exhaust all possible efforts in the search of consensus and in negotiating decisions and country programs. Let us support the President in the constructive leadership that he's been able to imprint on this board and in the furtherance of transparent dialogue aimed at reaching key agreements that will boost UNICEF's work over the next 4 years. President, you have the support of my delegation for successful deliberations. And in conclusion, I would like to say that I'm sure that this session will be another example of effective multilateralism as the ideal way to address crises overwhelming humanity. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I now give the floor to distinguished permanent representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam Executive Director, thank you to both of you for your important opening statements and all that you work that you do together for UNICEF. Excellencies, for more than 60 years, Denmark has been a committed partner to UNICEF, from hosting its global supply operations and the WASH Innovation Hub in Copenhagen to advancing innovative partnerships that link humanitarian action, climate resilience, and digital solutions. We take pride in contributing to UNICEF's ability to remain agile and deliver at scale, not least through flexible funding, ensuring that life-saving supplies, education, and protection reach children globally. We remain committed to supporting UNICEF in adapting to new global challenges and commend the dedication of UNICEF staff and partners who continue to put children first, even under the most challenging and dangerous circumstances. Denmark thanks UNICEF for the transparent and participatory manner in which you've developed a new strategic plan. The broad support expressed over recent months from both donors and program countries is a clear reflection of its quality, balance, and relevance. Recent global developments underscore the need for a strong and focused UNICEF, adapting UNICEF to a changing world, as E.D. Russell said. Conflicts, climate change, and humanitarian crisis make it urgent to ensure both emergency assistance and universal access to quality health and protection services for the most vulnerable, especially children and adolescents. We welcome that a new strategic plan is anchored in human rights and in leaving no one behind. Denmark values UNICEF's leadership in advancing sexual and reproductive health and rights, in delivering life-saving services in humanitarian crisis, and in empowering the largest generation of young people to shape their own futures. The strategic plan comes as a critical moment for the UN development system. The UN 80 reform must lead to a leaner, more coherent, and effective UN delivery, and we count on UNICEF to align closely with these efforts, working with other UN entities and resident coordinators under the One UN approach. We also note that this would be the last strategic plan under the 2030 agenda. It must therefore be implemented with urgency and a sharp focus on accelerating progress toward the SDGs. Denmark fully supports the plan and encourages its adoption by consensus. Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, as UNICEF embarks on this next strategic plan with renewed focus on accelerating progress, Denmark will continue to stand firmly by UNICEF and its vital mandate. I thank you.
I thank distinguished permanent representative of Denmark. I now give the floor to distinguished permanent representative of the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President and Madam Executive Director, Excellencies. At the outset, I would like to start by expressing my sympathy for the staff members that were detained in Yemen, and I really hope that they will be released and come back safe soon. With 5 years on the clock to achieve the goals of the 2030 agenda, the strategic plan comes at a pivotal moment. Amid challenges posed by conflict, climate change, economic hardship, and persistent gender inequality, there is no more time to lose for children worldwide. Challenges that will hit children that are the most vulnerable the hardest, by hunger, children on the move, children at risk because of their gender or identity, victims of sexual and gender-based violence. We welcome UNICEF's comprehensive strategic plan, enabling UNICEF to deliver impactful, rights-based results in priority areas for the Kingdom of the Netherlands: water, health, and food security. We recognize these are difficult times for the organizations and the staff, and in the face of significant budget cuts, we commend UNICEF for prioritizing programs on the ground over headquarter costs. And we applaud your excellent work in innovative financing, including partnerships with the private sector and international financial institutions. Avenues we encourage UNICEF to explore further and to share your best practices with other UN funds and programs. However, even with the strategic plan and budget now adopted, these documents must not be seen as static. The 2030 Agenda, the Future Focus Initiative, the UN 80 process, the Humanitarian Reset, and potential further budgetary constraints will affect the organization profoundly. And so as we go from here, 3 elements are key for us. Ensuring that these ambitious reforms do not take shape in isolation, but are interlinked, aligned, and mutually reinforcing. Effective coordination with other UN and agencies and member states, building on comparative advantage and seeking complementarity. And 3, UNICEF's normative mandate and human rights-based approach are central to all efforts. So as member of this executive board, we would like to ask, how will UNICEF ensure that member states remain well informed about these complex processes, and how will you ensure interagency coordination? Mr. President, time is ticking for children worldwide and future generations. We owe it to them to act decisively and future-proof. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished permanent representative of the Netherlands. I now invite distinguished representative of Bulgaria to take the floor.
Mr. President, in the interest of time, the full version of this statement will be submitted in a written form. Let me begin by thanking you and the Bureau members for the excellent work and for your opening remarks. You can count on Bulgaria's support and constructive engagement throughout our term as member of the Executive Board and beyond. I would also like to thank Executive Director Catherine Russell for her comprehensive statement, for highlighting these session priorities, and we welcome the discussion of the new strategic plan and the integrated budget that are firmly anchored in human rights and Agenda 2030. We commend UNICEF's continued focus on education, health, social protection, climate resilience, and especially on water and sanitation, which are vital for the children's survival and development. Humanitarian action remains a core priority for us. We express our deep admiration for UNICEF's response in Ukraine, Gaza, and all places affected by conflict and disaster. Bulgaria has joined the call to action for Palestinian children, and we value UNICEF's tireless work under the most difficult circumstances. At the same time, we remain concerned about resource gaps that risk limiting UNICEF's ability to reach the most vulnerable. Bulgaria values predictable and transparent financing, and despite constraints, will continue to prioritize contributions to UNICEF's core resources. We also stress the importance of partnerships. In this regard, Bulgaria is proud to co-chair the Group of Friends of Children and SDGs to support children globally through our official development assistance and to maintain a long-standing partnership with UNICEF under our country program. Together, we are advancing priorities such as early child development, inclusive education, eliminating child poverty, and tackling all forms of violence, and we will advance our cooperation with UNICEF well beyond the current program cycle. Next, we acknowledge and appreciate UNICEF's support in our successful process of deinstitutionalization and remain committed to sharing good practices, including through the United Kingdom initiative, Family for Every Child. Every child deserves to grow up in a safe and loving family environment, and Bulgaria stands ready to work as a leading country in this regard, in this field, together with UNICEF, also after 2027. Mr. President, in closing, Bulgaria remains firmly committed to working with UNICEF and all partners to advance the rights, well-being, and opportunities for every child, and to advance reforms towards effective multilateralism that delivers for all, including through systemic reform. I thank you.
Thank you, Bulgaria. I now give the floor to distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would also like to thank the Executive Director for the comprehensive statement. Republic of Korea has a long-standing development cooperation history with UNICEF to advance quality education, gender equality, and climate action in more than 30 countries. And I am proud of our shared achievements. In particular, Korea and the UNICEF jointly launched the Resilience for Children Plus initiative this year to strengthen children's recovery in humanitarian and crisis settings. This partnership supports education, water, sanitation, and hygiene and basic health services in Myanmar, Syria, Palestine, and Ethiopia. My government will continue to turn its commitment into concrete action in partnership with UNICEF. In this regard, I would like to highlight the following points. First, we welcome the overall direction of the strategic plan with its 3 intentional shifts. This bold conversion is indispensable for using current resources in a more efficient manner. Thus, we recognize the importance of this transformation and call for UNICEF's timely reporting to the Executive Board on how these transitions create added value for member states. Particularly, the result should include a donor's perspective for accountability and a program country's viewpoint for effectiveness in development programs. Second, we call on UNICEF to redouble efforts to expand its funding base. While promoting child-focused investment in the national system, in today's turbulent environment of shrinking resources, it is imperative to mobilize resources through stronger cooperation across the public and private sectors. Thus, we request UNICEF to strengthen the partnership with the private sectors. In addition, we encourage UNICEF to expand the tailored child policy advice for the expansion of child-focused budgets so that progress for children is safeguarded even where regular contributions are limited. Mr. President, the Convention on the Rights of Child, the most widely ratified human rights treaty, must not remain a mere promise on paper. The Republic of Korea, which firmly believes that children are our future, will continue to work closely with UNICEF for the realization of every child's rights. I thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, I now invite the Executive Director Russell to respond to some of the questions and comments we have heard. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to, at the outset, just really thank everyone sincerely for the very detailed and thoughtful comments. I really appreciate them very much. I'm not going to pretend to answer everything here. Just be assured that the team is taking careful notes and we will follow up with everyone individually. But I just wanted to respond to a couple points that you made because several of you have said things that others have repeated. First, to the colleague from Bolivia, I just wanted to say that I do appreciate you, and I think Denmark and others have made comments about the importance of and the bravery and courage of UNICEF staff, and I do really appreciate that. And I think I say this every board meeting, but I always pass those comments on to the staff too, not just that they're great, which they are, that they try really hard, work really hard, but also that they are put in very difficult situations. And my comments about Yemen, I think illustrate that, and something that I worry about constantly. So it's very important, I think, to the staff that you all recognize that and extend those very gracious comments. And I definitely do pass them on. So thank you so much for that. On Eritrea, I did want to mention one point, which is I wanted to thank you for mentioning the Africa strategy. That is really important to us. And I think we did a briefing on it last year. Was it last year, Omar? Yeah. And I think that's sort of moving along well. And it may make sense to do another sort of follow-up at some point just to sort of let people know where that is. But I think taking a look at the continent as a whole and thinking about how we're doing our work there and the partnerships there with Africa CDC and others, I think are really important. So thank you for mentioning that. To Germany, you mentioned several points, and I think I would just comment on one, which is, and let me just take a moment on this, on UN reform and FFI. So for us, we have tried through this effort that we're undergoing, our Future Focus initiative, to be as transparent as we can. In all honesty, this thing is moving fast by necessity, right? We have to move quickly because we have to get things done by certain deadlines so that we can notify staff in sufficient time. Hanan can elaborate on this if necessary, but really we have been trying to be as open as we can with our staff and as open as we can with you. And I know that we have done some briefings on that, and we will continue to do that. We are looking at every sort of different permutation of this and what it will mean for our staff in different ways, what it means for each issue area that we cover, what it means for each sort of level of staff. I mean, we are going through that as carefully as we can and making sure we don't have unintended consequences, given the fact that we are moving so quickly here, as I said, by necessity. So happy to keep everyone as informed about that as we can. And I think suffice it to say that we are dedicated, as I said in my remarks, to do this with sort of two things in mind. One, to be as merciful as we can to our staff who are going to be impacted by this. And it is an incredibly painful process, honestly, because I think people come to work at UNICEF not because it's a job, but because they see themselves as part of the mission. And it's very, very hard to say to them, we're sorry, but we're not going to be able to continue this. It's very difficult. We're also determined to come out of this at least as strong, hopefully stronger than we went into it. And that's not easy, given that we're facing these really difficult budget cuts, but we're trying to think about how we can reorganize in a way that makes the most use of the assets we have, how we can partner with others, how we can expand our private sector partnerships. Many of you have mentioned that. We are looking at every possible avenue, but very much welcome any suggestions and ideas. I mean, please, if you got some brainstorm, give it to us, share it with us, because we are doing our best here, but it is a very difficult circumstance because it's happening so fast. So to Belgium, I take the point on that this is not just efficiencies, that we need system-wide coherence, and I agree with that totally. You asked many, many questions, and we will follow up with you directly. I'm sorry, I can't remember where you're sitting, but yes, there you are. We'll follow up with you directly because they're all really good questions, and we're struggling with all of them and trying to address them as best we can, but I think would be happy to have that conversation. To El Salvador, you made one point that I thought was particularly important, which is that UNICEF, we are most impactful, most successful when we work hand in hand with governments. That's our job, right? We're trying to build the capacity of governments around the world to deal with the issues that their children are facing. And so I could not agree more that partnership is the essential work here. And I think we need to always focus on that. And indeed, I think that's how we look at our work. To Mozambique, I think that the point you said about investment is really sort of about the choices that we're making, and I think that's so true. We think about it carefully. We are doing our best, and I take your point on localization. We see that as an absolute priority, again, because we want to build the capacity of others to do the work, and so I very much appreciate that point. To the comment from the colleague from Ecuador, thank you for raising the point about the violence that children face. I mean, it's just an incredibly difficult situation, and it makes everything else we do that much harder when children are in those situations. So thank you for mentioning that. The comment from Denmark comments, I think first, I do very much appreciate your commitment to innovation. And I think that is a central sort of component of the work we do at UNICEF, both because we see the importance of innovation out in the field, but also because we always want to challenge ourselves to do better, be better. And I think that it's very much in the DNA of the organization, and I appreciate that. And I think you all have been very supportive of that. And I also appreciate the comments about a strong and focused UNICEF. We are definitely doing our best on that, but appreciate the encouragement. To the comments from our colleague from the Netherlands, a couple things. One, thank you for the sort of focus on the most vulnerable. I mean, we keep that in mind all the time that, yes, our mandate is for all children. We say that all the time, but the most vulnerable children are obviously the ones that we are most worried about. And sometimes they're the hardest to reach, the hardest to impact, but we never lose sight of that. And we appreciate your recognition of that. And I also appreciate the way you said there's just no time to wait. And I think we feel that too, that urgency, especially when you look at children, if you think about children who are, maybe they're out of school for a year, out of school for 2 years, that can be a big chunk of a child's life. It's not like us, or I should speak for myself, an old person, where 2 years is not that much in your lifetime, but for children that means a lot, and they can really get behind, and I think we take that very seriously. To Bulgaria, thank you for the comments about water and sanitation. I feel like sometimes that gets left behind, and I think obviously it's absolutely critical to the health of children, so very much appreciate that. And also your comments about multilateralism. I mean, many of you have made that point about the importance of the multilateral system. We obviously believe that. We are part of it. We see that we can make a real difference, and it's hard to imagine what the world would be like without a multilateral system. So I think it's important to keep reinforcing the value of that. And then finally, to the colleague from Korea, thank you so much. I appreciated your point about the long relationship that UNICEF has had with Korea. And I think in some ways it's such a wonderful example of a country that has done extraordinarily well and then has turned around to help others. I love that story. It makes me happy every time I think about it. So thank you. And also thank you for your comments about the private sector. I would say more generally, I think at UNICEF, and Kitty leads this work, as you all know, very committed to working with the private sector. And I think we do a very good job of that. And I think there's always room for increasing it, but it comes with its own challenges for sure, because the private sectors, they're different entities, but I think we have learned a lot. We're trying to share that with our other colleagues. And I guess I would just close with that point, at least in this segment, which is that throughout this UN80 effort, we are working closely. We are sort of the co-chairs of 2 of the groups on humanitarian and development. We are working as closely and as hard with our colleagues as we can to come up with ideas. I think you all know the general framework here, which is that Secretary General kind of sent the clusters back to say, come up with some more big ideas. And then he's going to decide what he wants to propose to all of you. But I think my sense from him is that he welcomes ideas and suggestions from you as well. And I think, just to reassure that we will do whatever we can to ensure the success of UN80. We think it's just an incredibly important exercise at this stage to, take a step back and think about how the UN can be as effective as possible, how we can deliver on the SDGs. So we are committed to that. We're doing a lot of work on supply chains and, trying to bring our particular expertise to the table. But also just trying to think more broadly about what should this system look like. And I think all of you are going to have a lot to say about that, and I would encourage you to participate in the process, which I'm sure you will. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you, Executive Director. Now I invite distinguished representative of Lao People Democratic Republic to take the floor.
Mr. President, at the outset, I wish to commend you, Mr. President, and the member of the Bureau for your able leadership in guiding the works of the Executive Board through now 2025. I also wish to express my appreciation to the Executive Directors for her opening statement, which provided valuable updates on UNICEF's activities, the current situation of the children globally, and the organization's future priorities in advancing its mission of protecting the rights and well-being of children worldwide. Mr. President, we must meet deepening crises in some regions of the world that disproportionately impact the children. Many are living and growing up in areas affected by conflicts, where vast numbers are displaced and at risk from disease. Meanwhile, humanitarian needs continue to rise, but funding declines. Given this challenging time, we remain appreciative of UNICEF's response, delivering life-saving assistance and protecting services across emergencies. This underscores the vital needs for sustained action. Therefore, we urge UNICEF to remain steadfast to its very mission in this regard. We value UNICEF's partnership and support as we advance this work at a time of constrained fiscal space and high needs. We support and commend UNICEF's work through the implementation of the strategic plan at the global level and the CDPs at the national level that align with each country's development priorities. Mr. President, the LAO PDR is preparing its next UNICEF's country program, fully aligned with our national socio-economic development plans and our SDGs commitment. We expect the next cycle will focus on such areas as child poverty reduction, health and nutrition system, education recovery, child protection, and climate resilience. We therefore invite development partners to support us through predictable, flexible, and catalytic financing complemented by targeted technical cooperation and innovation mechanisms, aligned with national priorities and the forthcoming CDPs. In conclusions, we thank UNICEF for unwavering commitment to children in this challenging time. Your efforts to safeguard their rights, foster their development, and unlock their potential are more essential than ever. I thank you.
Thank you, LAO PDR. Now, I would like to invite distinguished representative of China to take the floor.
President, I thank Executive Director Russell for her introduction. At a time when children in many places, including Africa and the Middle East, are facing serious crises such as conflicts and natural disasters, UNICEF, in close connection with the Convention on the Rights of the Child and other mandates, in broad consultation with member states, has developed its strategic plan 2026 to 2029, which deserves our recognition. Here, I would like to make 3 points. First, China supports the new UNICEF strategic plan, which covers a number of important aspects of the implementation of the 2030 agenda, including children's health, education, poverty reduction, protection, disaster reduction, and response to climate change. We hope UNICEF will do a good job in implementing the plan, thereby providing strong support for children around the world, developing countries in particular, to achieve the SDGs by 2030. Second, China calls for effective measures to address the challenge of insufficient resources, in particular core resources. The total income for the new strategic plan cycle has been adjusted downward by 27% compared with previous projections. Developed countries should effectively fulfill their ODA commitments, and UNICEF should continue to take effective and innovative financing measures to ensure sufficient resources to support the implementation of the strategic plan in the new cycle. Third, China supports the constructive participation of UNICEF in the UN80 process, focusing on the needs of children and enhancing its delivery capacity on the ground. UNICEF should leverage its dual mandate for development and humanitarian affairs, strengthen coordination with other UN agencies at headquarters and at the country level, and maximize the synergy of the UN development and humanitarian systems. President, China has cooperation with UNICEF for over 4 decades with fruitful results. The new cycle of the UNICEF country program for China is in line with the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for China, and will, during China's implementation of the 15th Five-Year Plan for National Economic and Social Development, help Chinese children fully implement relevant SDGs and achieve more comprehensive and balanced development. China will also continue to provide UNICEF with staunch support in core and non-core resources, carry out South-South cooperation, and support multilateralism, support children from the Global South in achieving shared development. Lastly, I would like to thank you, President and Executive Director Russell, for your leadership and excellent work. China express our admiration and gratitude to UNICEF staff globally for their efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, China. I now invite distinguished representative of France.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, distinguished colleagues, France aligns itself with the joint statement which was delivered by Belgium, and we would like to add the following points in national capacity. At the outset, I reaffirm France's staunch support to the dual mandate of UNICEF. UNICEF embodies more than ever the universal values that bring us all together. And I congratulate you, Madam Executive Director, for your work and that of your teams who are working in contexts that are often challenging. And in that regard, I want to underscore that France strongly condemns the arbitrary detention by the Houthi of dozens of UN personnel, including a large number of UNICEF employees. Just yesterday, that happened. We call for their immediate unconditional release, and we reaffirm our full support for the work of the UN in Yemen. Mr. President, given the multiple emergencies in terms of education, health, food, and access to drinking water, UNICEF remains the essential pillar for the protection and the promotion of the rights of children. France supports the ambition of the strategic plan for 2026-2029 and its focus around the 5 impact results, which fit well into the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. Education, health, and combating malnutrition, protection against violence, combating multidimensional poverty, gender equality from childhood, as well as the addressing the consequences of climate change. These must remain the priorities of UNICEF for the period 2026-2029. It's also important for the entirety of the UN system to build its capacity to anticipate and adapt to have more impact among those who are the beneficiaries. The efforts you have undertaken, Madam Executive Director, to strengthen budget transparency, improve spending, and improve reach on the ground, these are essential, especially in the context of the UN 80 context, and they need to be strengthened. That means focusing work on the most vulnerable countries, strengthening the concrete impact of projects, and to continue to mobilize private innovative financing and to strengthen synergies together with other UN agencies in a network. President, in the context of the UN reforms, including the UN 80 initiative launched by the Secretary General, we need to collectively rethink how we work. We need to make our work more lucid, coherent, and transparent. We must strengthen multilateral architecture around children. UNICEF serves as a driving force in this transformation. The initiative Future Focus, which has been implemented by UNICEF since March of 2025, and the efforts undertaken in this context need to continue both in the development and in the humanitarian fields. France will stand by your side, Madam Executive Director, to support the action of UNICEF in all the areas where it works. I thank you.
Thank you, France. I now invite distinguished representative of the United States to have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for your remarks, Executive.
you.